I have a friend who's a Presbyterian pastor in an affluent part of Los Angeles. He tells of one day doing the wedding for a Hollywood film producer. And he describes the setting as this spectacular backyard of a mansion that overlooks the blue Pacific Ocean. And as a part of the wedding, the mother of the groom stepped up to this outdoor microphone and read a poem that she had composed in honor of the occasion. And after she finished, my friend told me the crowd burst into applause and said, "Oh, that's so good. Oh, isn't that good?" After that, my friend, as part of the service, stepped up to the microphone and he read Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient, love is kind, is not irritable, believes all things, hopes all things. And when he completed 1 Corinthians 13, he said, there was a stunned silence, and suddenly the crowd burst into applause and said, "Oh, that's good. That is so good." They thought he had written 1 Corinthians 13. And afterwards, he said he had several people come up and ask for a copy of his poem. There's bad news and there's good news here. First, the bad news, of course, is that Hollywood is biblically illiterate. No surprise there. But the good news is when they hear God's love described, they burst into applause and they say, "I want that." I sometimes call this book not Corinthians, but Califorinthians, because if there was a Hollywood of antiquity, it was Corinth. It was the ancient love capital of the world. It had dominating its skyline the temple of Aphrodite, that was the goddess of love, and that had a staff of 1,000 sacred prostitutes. Corinth was a city of fast buck artists and overnight millionaires. A sea captain could save 202 miles of dangerous sailing down around the southern tip of Greece if he would allow the Corinthians to carry his ship over a 4-mile spit of land. And so Corinth was filled many times with thousands of sailors on shore leave. As a matter of fact, there was a verb in Greek, korinthazai, to live like a Corinthian, which was simply the word for to fornicate. The reason we have this book in the Bible to Corinth is because the sleaze of the city had made its way into the very church of Corinth. We have an account in that book about a man in the church who was having an affair with his own stepmother, and no one in that church batted an eye. There was cases in the church of members taking the others to court in secular law courts. In worship services like this, members of the church in the congregation would stand up and try and commandeer control of the service out of the hands of the leaders up front. The place was a zoo. And Paul, of course, probably wishes he could go over and just shake these people, but he's at a distance, and all he has at his disposal is pen and paper. And so he takes as the motif of his letter the grand theme of the city of Corinth. You know, it takes a little nerve to lecture Corinthians on love, but that's what he does. And in so doing, Paul composes what is still today the most popular piece of literature in the world. Now, Paul's writing in this chapter is so polished compared to the rest of the book of Corinthians that there are those who believe, some scholars believe, that this 13th chapter must have been a poem that Paul had stashed in a drawer someplace, and he slipped it in as a kind of delightful digression to lighten the mood of what otherwise was a very painful letter. Now, that's a very intriguing thought, but the problem with that theory is you find in 1 Corinthians 13 a mention of all of the issues that are mentioned previously in the book that are dividing the church there. He talks about the speaking in tongues, prophecy, jealousy, self-promotion, keeping score of old wrongs. And he's saying, how are you ever going to overcome these things that are tearing and shredding this church? How are you ever going to keep your community surviving? He says it's going to take one thing, and that is extraordinary love. Only not your kind of love, not Aphrodite love, not Hollywood love. You're going to have to learn to love at a whole new altitude. Or as we'd say today, there's been an upgrade to divine love that you have to download into your lives. The way Paul says it is, he says, "I will show you the most excellent way." I invite you to reach for the Bible, and we're going to look at this remarkable piece of literature that today stands on shelves alongside Shakespeare and the great literature of all history. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning with verse 1. And now I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have a gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, if I surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away, for we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Here ends the reading. Paul makes 3 points here. He speaks first of the preeminence of love, and then later in the chapter, he speaks of the practicality of love, and he closes by chapter by speaking of the permanence of love. We begin with the preeminence of love. First of all, every love song you have ever heard, Paul agrees with. Love is a many-splendored thing. Love will find a way. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. You're nobody till somebody loves you. Only in his ode to love, he swaps out eros, worldly love, and he substitutes what scholars call an old word that had been falling out of use, but Paul fills it with new meaning, the word agape. Now, eros love is love that seeks value and determines by value. It's what makes us say, I gotta have, and then complete the sentence. That man, that woman, that experience, a vacation in the Bahamas. Eros goes out from us like a heat-seeking missile that goes toward those things that we find attractive. Eros can be like a mind-altering drug. For example, think back to some of the dumb decisions you made when you thought you were in love at some point in your life. Under the spell of Eros, we say, I love you because you're rich, you're beautiful, you have this certain way about you. There have been a million love songs written to complete the sentence, I love you because of the way I feel when I'm with you, like I'm a little child again, like I feel I'm so taken care of. And it is this giddy, wonderful, floating on a cloud feeling. It's one of the great feelings in the world, that kind of love. But be aware, my friend, when you say to somebody, I love you because, what you're really saying to them is, I love you as long as you're beautiful, you're rich. You continue to be my nonstop dream machine 24 hours a day. Eros has a way of going poof into thin air. Why, even in the Christmas story, Joseph loved Mary until he found out that there was a baby inside of her that he could not be the father of, and you can see him backpedaling in the story. He gets cold feet, and we're told that he resolved to divorce her quietly. Eros is somehow notoriously fickle. And because most of us believe that that's really our only hope of being loved, our life becomes one long campaign to try to make ourselves look attractive and worthy of love. Friend, you cannot make yourself worthy of love no matter how hard you try. And that is true for the simple reason that none of us is worthy of love. And if Eros love is, I love you because, agape, God's love, is, I love you in spite of. In spite of your nasty temper, in spite of your incurable flakiness, in spite of the fact that you no longer look like that person in that picture when we were married 25 years ago. Eros is, C.S. Lewis says, is need love. It's natural human love, because you and I were born into this world as a helpless bundle of needs. And so naturally, we love the things that meet our needs. When I'm driving on long distance drives, I get ravenously hungry. And I frequently reward myself by stopping for a Butterfingers Blizzard at Dairy Queen. And I love to be driving along, keep my eyes looking for billboards of DQs. Well, with Eros, the sound you hear is the sucking sound of me sucking in those things that will, and those people and those experiences that will fill me up and satisfy my needs and my longings. But now say hello to agape love, which does not suck in, it flows out. And agape love is not grounded in the favorable aspects of the love object, but it is grounded in the decision in the heart of the lover. And it is illogical, this agape love. It is not a love that goes out seeking value. Agape love goes out to bring value to that which it loves. Several weeks ago, I told about my friend Ian, who has a little girl. He had a little girl, she's grown up now, named Rosemarie, who fell head over heels in love with a little rag doll. And some of you in your families, you have kids, young'uns, who have bonded with a doll or a blanket or with a teddy bear, and wild horses cannot tear that kid away from that doll. And the kid holds onto the doll, drags it through the mud, and it just gets shabbier. And the more you try to clean it up, the worse and uglier it gets. And after a while, it's kind of this little germ factory that she's carrying along. And logic would tell you that there are other toys that child has that are a lot more valuable than that crummy doll, but none is as loved as that doll. Because there are things that are loved because they're valuable, but there are other things that are valuable because they are loved. And you look at that and logic would tell you that thing was nothing more than a bundle of rags when it was new. And now it's a filthy bundle of rags. And what do you do with a filthy bundle of rags is you throw it out on the trash heap. But boy, anyone who loves that child would never think of doing that. Agape is that wild, crazy love that a child has for her rag doll. And friends, you and I are loved with that same wild, crazy, irrational love. We have soiled ourselves. The prophet Isaiah says that our righteousness is nothing but filthy rags. You can look around this room right now and you're seeing God's own collection of rag dolls. And it's astonishing. It's wondrous. I have a friend who is a Presbyterian pastor who migrated from Holland many decades ago. And Garrett tells the story about coming to the United States and struggling with English. And in the church where he kept running across this word, A-G-A-P-E. And he assumed that it was pronounced the way it sounds, agape. And he kept looking at this word, A-G-A-P-E, agape. And he looked up in the dictionary and it said, to stand with your mouth wide open. And he said, to this day, that's still the best definition of God's love he's ever seen. It just makes you stand with your mouth wide open. It makes no sense, because there are things that are loved because they're valuable, but you and I are valuable because we are loved. Paul speaks first of the preeminence of love. And then Paul goes on to speak of the practicality of love. He now describes love as it appears in the moments of everyday life. Love is patient, love is kind. And then comes this string of negatives. Love does not empty, it does not boast. Paul brilliantly here touches on those practical aspects of the fact that there are negative qualities that we turn into weapons to use each other in our intimate warfare against each other. He says it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love endures all things. A group of third graders was one time asked, what is love? A little girl piped up and said, my grandma has arthritis, and so she can't bend over anymore and paint her toenails. And so now grandpa does it, even though he has arthritis in his hands. Love is practical. When I get to this practical section, when I'm doing weddings, couples often ask me to read 1 Corinthians 13. When I get to this practical middle section, I always try to get eye contact with the bride and the groom. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not irritable. It is not resentful. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. It is sentiment become substance. It is romance become reality. It is eros in overalls. Love is practical. But you know, it's not practical if you can't do it. And God never demands anything from us that he does not empower within us. And so, friend, if you're going to take this command to love home with you, be sure and take the power to make it happen in your life. And that is only through the indwelling presence of the living Christ. One of the most powerful things you can do is to take this text and take out the word love and insert the word Jesus. Jesus is patient. Jesus is kind. Jesus is not irritable. Jesus believes all things, endures all things. Jesus' love never fails. Our love fails, but Jesus can love through us with a love that never fails. Love is preeminent, love is practical, and now Paul ends by saying love is permanent. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. There are only three things in all of life that last forever: faith, hope, and the greatest of all is love. Best definition of love I think I've ever heard comes from the British novelist Brian Moore. Brian Moore says, love is an old couple in their 90s, each listening for the other step in the next room, afraid a sudden silence or a sudden cry could mean that a lifetime's talk is over. Love is not a feeling. Love is a whole life. Dr. Richard Seltzer is on the faculty of Yale Medical School. He's a surgeon. And he tells about one day standing in the hospital room of a young woman who has lost her physical beauty. He writes, I stand by the bed where the young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted in palsy, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be this way from now on. I had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh, I promise you that, but to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut the little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they seem to dwell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. The young woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this? She asks. Yes, I say it will. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. I think it's cute. All at once, I know who he is, and I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with God. Unmindful, he bends to kiss her crooked mouth, and I am so close, I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate hers, to show their kiss still works. 2,000 years ago, God twisted himself into a tiny manger to show us how much he loves us. And today, in your life and in mine, his kiss still works. And now he calls us to go out through these doors and to carry his kiss to the whole world. And the greatest of these is love.